So continuing with Southampton, I'm going to pick up on an issue now that will follow through in relation to a number of the centres that were served by the Wessex Regional Transfusion Centre. And we'll come back to some further documents this afternoon in relation to Salisbury. But if we can start at DHSC 0002247_090, please. You will see this is a letter of the 4th of October 1984. It's from the Deputy Medical Director of the Wessex Regional Transfusion Centre, Dr. Barnes, and it's sent to a number of consultant haematologists. So I'll list them all. For present purposes, we're dealing with Dr. Chisholm at Southampton General, but you'll see it goes to Dr. Arenstam at Trelaws, Dr. Ossier at Bournemouth, Dr. Green at Portsmouth, Dr. Parry at Salisbury, Dr. Maver at Winchester, Dr. Gilliver at Dorchester, Dr. McAndrew at Newport. And it concerns BPL Factor 8, batch number HL3136. And the letter reads, with further reference to Mr. Allison's telephone call to your blood bank chief MLSO yesterday, asking for the above quoted batch of Factor 8 to be recalled and returned to us. The reason for this is that one of the donors whose plasma was incorporated in this pool is now thought to be suffering from AIDS. So this is a BPL batch of concentrate. Investigations are being carried out and the diagnosis should be settled one way or the other within the next week or two. In the meantime, may I confirm Mr. Allison's request and ask for all unused ampules of this batch to be recalled and returned to this centre. In order to prevent undue worry to your patients, may I ask you for your discretion here and for the time being at least to keep this new, I think that should be news to yourself. When any definite information does become available, either Dr. Smith or myself will let you know. So that letter was written to, amongst others, Dr. Chisholm at Southampton in October 1984. The evidence we have, and we'll come on to some of the documents, suggests that there were potentially 8 patients at the Southampton Centre who may have been treated with that batch. We can see 2 patients shared as between Southampton and Trelaws who were treated with it from a letter at TREL 40110_040. Oh, can we take that down, please? And can we stop the transcript?
Yes.
Thank you. A name wasn't redacted. It may be that that's not a problem, but on the copy I have, 2 names are redacted, and I don't want to risk any inadvertent identification. So we won't put that letter back up.
I think what you can do is we can restart the transcript in a moment, but you can simply summarise.
I absolutely can.
So shall we put the transcript back on?
Yes, we'll restart the transmission, please. So without putting the letter up at all, in December of 1984, Dr. Bell, in his capacity as a locum consultant haematologist, wrote to Dr. Arenstam at Trelaws, explaining that there were 2 patients who'd been issued with the batch from Southampton Haemophilia Centre, 10 bottles on the 22nd of August and a further 3 bottles on the 29th of August of 1984. And Dr. Bell's understanding was that they were being kept under review. So I'm fairly confident that wasn't a problematic display because I don't think it was an anonymous patient to looking at the name, but I'm just erring on the side of caution, if I may. So we know 2 of the patients treated with the batch were, at Southampton were also pupils at Trelaws. There's then a follow-up letter in relation to this batch, this time from BPL at CBLA 0001997. This is from Dr. Snape, 24th of January 1985. Follow-up of patients treated with Factor 8 batch HL3136 If we just look over the page, first of all, we'll see it was a letter sent to a range of recipients, including there Dr. Chisholm, Southampton General Hospital. If we go back to the first page, it explains, in October 1984, you were informed by Dr. Smith, Director of Wessex RTC, of the need to recover and return to BPL all unused vials from batch HL3186, following confirmation of the inclusion in the plasma pool from which the batch was manufactured of plasma from a confirmed AIDS sufferer. With your assistance, this recall was completed promptly and effectively. As you know, the follow-up of patients treated with batch HL3186 is being coordinated by Dr. John Crask, PHLS Manchester. I understand from Dr. Crask that he's received very poor response to requests for details of patients treated with this batch, and an even less satisfactory response to requests for samples of patients' sera. I would urge you to give Dr. Crask your complete support in the identification of patients treated with this batch and in the clinical follow-up outlined in Dr. Crask's letter of the 20th of November 1984. We'll look at Dr. Crask's letter in relation to one of the later haemophilia centres. Dr. Bell, on behalf of Southampton, responded to Dr. Snape on the 29th of January 1985, CBLA 5010_194. Actually, Shomik, before we put that up, I'm just going to be, out of an abundance of caution, let's not put that up if we may. I'm going to read the relevant part of the letter. I'm going to do that simply because I know there are a number of patient names listed in the letter and I don't want to put anything up which shouldn't. So it's a short letter, and the reference for the transcript I've already given. It says, Dear Dr. Snape, thank you for your letter of the 24th of January regarding follow-up of patients treated with factor VIII batch HL3186. All 8 patients exposed to this batch at Southampton have been informed of the problem, and sera from 7 of these patients have been sent to Dr. John Crask. One of the 8 patients is being followed up by Dr. Arenstam at Lord Mayor Trelaw College, although he was supplied with factor VIII from this centre. And then Dr. Bell provided Dr. Snape at BPL with the names of the 8 patients who had been exposed to that batch. So that's the information we have from the correspondence with Southampton about that particular issue. We'll see, as I say, with later centres, probably with Salisbury, some of the further correspondence surrounding the Wessex donation and the potential contamination of that particular batch. Now, in terms of the number of seroconversions to HIV for patients treated in Southampton, we don't have any data on the table of information that we put together from data supplied by UKHCDO. The reason for that, as I understand it, is that for some of the smaller centres treating in the 1980s, they didn't directly report the test results to UKHCDO, even though they had patients who they'd treated and they had patients who they may have arranged for their testing for HTLV3. So sometimes the data was reported through other centres, and our understanding from UKHCDO was that Southampton data was reported to UKHCDO by the centre at Basingstoke. So we don't have a discrete figure for the number of patients infected with HIV or who may have been infected with HIV at Southampton. There are a couple of documents which give us some information, however. The first, which is in relation to a specific patient, is HCDO 40132_035. If we go to the second page, this is just to provide some information about a particular seroconversion at Southampton. We can see there that for this patient, date of last negative test, 22nd of February 1985. Date of first positive test, 14th of October 1985. So that suggests potential seroconversion in the course of 1985. It said that the result was confirmed in the reference laboratory and a second specimen tested and the result confirmed. Not known when the last dose of unheated factor VIII was. Date of first dose of heated factor VIII, approximately April 1985. And then we can see this was a patient treated as they're set out, including with the Armour products, so Armour, Coate and Lister. Given that the date of the first dose of heated factor VIII is said to have been approximately April 1985, it looks as though this was a patient treated with unheated commercial concentrate Coate in January of 85 and with unheated Armour concentrate in January of 85. And then home treatment with an Armour product, which again from the batch number looks like it was probably unheated, because it's the same batch number as was given in January 1985, and then with a Lister product from May 1985, which presumably would have been, given the dates, heat treated. The form at face value at least tends to suggest that unheated commercial concentrates may still have been used to treat patients in the course of 1985 until the heated NHS product became available, and appears to suggest, in relation to this patient at least, seroconversion in 1985.
Yes.
The other piece of information that we have, which gives an indication of potentially of numbers of patients infected, comes from a document at MACF 40175_036. And that's a letter, the 31st of July 1989, from Dr. Chisholm to the Macfarlane Trust. And it says, thank you for your recent note listing the 10 patients registered with the Southampton Haemophilia Centre who have registered with the Trust. Now, that may, of course, include patients infected who are currently registered with the Southampton Centre but might have been infected through treatment elsewhere. And that's always going to be the case with this kind of data that we have. But in any event, it may provide some indication. And then the letter continues, in addition to those, there is one further patient, the girlfriend of a haemophiliac who died last year, who I believe is registered independently with the Trust. So it would suggest there at least one case of a partner becoming infected. In terms of hepatitis C, we don't have figures for the numbers infected, I'm afraid. You've received a range of evidence from patients describing the way in which they learned that they had been infected with hepatitis C. And that includes, in relation to Southampton, patients being told, one case in 1994, at a routine checkup, unaware that they'd been tested. And another example of a patient explaining that they'd not been aware that they were being tested for hepatitis C. So that's is a summary of the information available in relation to Southampton. I'm going to turn next to Truro. And if we start in relation to Truro by looking at OXUH 303765_020. These are the minutes of a UKHCGO Haemophilia Centre Directors meeting. My apologies. This is a meeting of Haemophilia Centre Directors and Blood Transfusion Centre Directors within the Oxford Super Region. 19th of June 1978. If we go to the second page, bottom half of the page, we see their designation of haemophilia centres and associate centres. Dr. Ritzer reported that 12 new centres or associate centres have been established since the last super-regional meeting, and then we can see them, they're listed. Some of them are ones I'll come to today, and some are for later. Barnstable, Bath, Bristol Children's, Dorchester, Kettering, Northampton, Plymouth, Salisbury, Taunton, Yeovil, and then Truro, which I'm currently dealing with, and Winchester. And you'll see there the name of the directors as at the date of this meeting in 1978. So we know from this that Dr. Murrell was the director at the point in time at which the haemophilia service at Truro became recognised as an associate centre. Dr. Murrell, as far as we understand the position, remained director until around 1987. And then Dr. Helena Daly took over as director in late 1987 and remained in that position until around 1992. Dr. Daly's provided a statement to the inquiry, in fact, two statements to the inquiry. We don't need to put them up on screen, but the references for the transcript to WITN 4685001 and WITN 4685008. And so she's given a description of the facilities available in Truro at the point in time at which she arrived, so second half of the 1980s. She describes a well-equipped haematology laboratory opening in 1986, 8 beds available for inpatients on an acute medical ward, a house physician and a senior house officer providing day-to-day care. And she describes 2 general haematology clinics. So it's a broader haematology service, not solely relating to haemophilia, staffed by 2 consultants, 1 staff grade doctor, 2 clinical assistants and 1 senior house officer, as well as a range of nursing staff. And she says further that, again, this is very much in describing the second half of the 1980s, all outpatient activities, including haemophilia care, were held in a purpose-built haematology oncology unit adjacent to the laboratory, funded by locally raised funds. The unit was run as a day treatment centre and incorporated an outpatient transfusion room, plasma exchange room, procedure room, treatment room, cytotoxic preparation suite, and consultant and nursing offices. If we look, again, just dealing with facilities and the like at Truro, at DHSC 0002472_103, this is an extract from Haemophilia Centre publication. If we just go to the second page and look at the bottom half of the page under the heading Grants to Centres, we can see in relation to the Royal Cornwall Hospital Truro, there's a grant of £2,500 to help with integration of haemophilia patient records to a standard compatible with the rest of the hospital. So what exactly was meant by that is unclear, but it would appear to raise a question mark about the way in which records have been maintained. The date of that publication is April of 1990. The blood transfusion centre, which supplied Truro with blood products, was based at Bristol. And if we look at DHSC 010026_061, we'll see from this letter, which is dated the 15th of May 1973, that the Southwest Regional Transfusion Centre in Bristol was supplying cryoprecipitate to a number of hospitals, including Truro. This is before the establishment of Truro as a formal associate centre. So we can see in this letter to Dr. Maycock, the author gives details of a list of hospitals in the southwest region to which we issue cryoprecipitate. And we can see, again, it encompasses Exeter, Taunton, Torquay, Penzance, Truro, which was where the centre was then subsequently confirmed, Plymouth, Gloucester, Cheltenham, Barnstaple, Bath, Yeovil, Weston-super-Mare, and Bristol. In her witness statement, Dr. Daly described a close relationship between the Haemophilia Centre at Truro and the Blood Transfusion Centre. She says that the Haemophilia Centre received blood and blood products from the Transfusion Centre on a constant, routine and occasional emergency basis. They never let us down, even though Truro was the furthest city from a blood transfusion centre in the UK, and our catchment included the Scilly Isles. The first available annual return is from 1977, and if we turn to that at HCDO 301213, We can see this was completed by Dr. Murrell. It showed 28 patients being treated in relation to haemophilia during the year, no patients with haemophilia B. There's a total amount of material used there, given in handwriting there. So cryoprecipitate, 1,066 bags, and then Lister factor 8, looks like 347 bottles. And then we can see that set out in the table below. So at that point in time, no commercial concentrate there, but you'll see by cryobilin, there has been written, presumably by Dr. Morello on behalf of Dr. Morello, question mark data not available, which suggests that there might have been some use of cryobilin, but that they didn't have figures as to the quantity. That's at least one inference that one might draw from that document. We don't have an annual return for 1978. 1979 is at HCDO 301380. We can see there 14 patients treated in 1979, and then the treatment largely comprising NHS concentrates, 125,000 units, with a small usage of cryoprecipitate, 2,000 units, and a small usage of cryobilin, 2,500 units. If we turn to 1980, HCDO 301478, we can see there 20 patients with haemophilia A treated, 2 with von Willebrand's. We don't, I think, have a return indicating the number of patients with haemophilia B that year. We've got the breakdown as between hospital and home treatment. We can see cryoprecipitate being used to a reasonably large extent in hospital. It looks like 34,600 units handwritten there, but not at all for home treatment. And then we can see NHS concentrates being used both for hospital and home treatment, and then again cryobilin being used for hospital and home treatment. So the sole commercial concentrate there in use is the Immuno product. If we pick the picture up in 1981 at HCDO 301582, the writing, I'm afraid, is fairly faint. It looks like there are 25 patients treated there. Or, no, it might be 23, not entirely sure.
Looks like 23 to me.
Yes, you may be right, sir, I think. And then if we look at the figures, not clear, but usage in relation to cryoprecipitate, obviously they're very small. That looks like 300 units, and none at all for home treatment. And then it's difficult to discern what the figures are in relation to NHS concentrate and cryobilin, but we can see in any event the same pattern repeated, that those are the two products in use for the treatment of patients. 1982's return is at HCDO 301677, and happily is rather more legible. 20 patients treated in 1982. We can see cryoprecipitate being used to a reasonable extent in hospital, 18,000 units, not at all for home treatment. And then NHS concentrates are the major form of treatment, just over 56,000 in hospital, 168,700 units for home treatment. And then again, the one commercial concentrate in usage to a reasonably substantial extent is cryobilin, a total of 70,000 units distributed between hospital and home treatment. The picture for 1983 is at HCDA 301774. 21 patients treated. The figures are given in a mix of units and bottles. But the pattern is essentially, I think, the same. So a small amount of cryoprecipitate, and then the major treatment coming with NHS concentrate and with cryobilin. And that's the same picture for 1984, but with one significant difference. So If we go to HCDO 301868, we can see in 1984, a year in which 27 patients with haemophilia A and one von Willebrand's patient were treated, it's the same three products, cryo, NHS concentrate and cryobulin, but a much larger volume of cryoprecipitate being used in 1984, 100,000 units in hospital, again, 0 for home treatment. NHS concentrates 45,000 in hospital, 180 for home treatment. And then the largest volume is cryobulin, 300,000 units distributed there between hospital and home treatment in 1984. Again, we don't have any information, I'm afraid, which enables us to discern why that different picture emerges, both in terms of a greater use of cryoprecipitate in 1984, but also an increased use of cryobulin in 1984. Dr. Daly describes in her statement coming onto the scene in 1986 an understanding that Dr. Murrell had made the switch to heat-treated commercial factor concentrates prior to the availability of UK heat-treated concentrates. And her understanding was that Dr. Murrell used BPL treatments, heat-treated products from April of 1985 when he could, and commercial heat-treated products when the BPL material was not available. And then from October 1985, her evidence was that the centre used 8Y, so the BPL product, preferred especially for children, mildly affected patients, and patients with no previous exposure to prevent, she says, non-A, non-B hepatitis. Again, her recollection from 1986 is that home treatment was already well established, and that appears to be borne out by the returns. She doesn't recall initiating home treatment for any patient while she was at the Truro Centre. In terms of knowledge of risk, little is known about what Dr. Murrell, as a matter of fact, did or did not know about the risk of viral infection. We've seen the year in which the centre in Truro became a recognised associate centre. So from that point onwards, it may be reasonable to assume that he received copies of UK HCDO minutes. Whether they were received before then may be more open to doubt. Dr. Murrell does not appear to have been a regular attender at UK HCDO meetings. So the minutes record him attending a meeting in October 1977. And that was a fairly significant meeting in terms of discussions about hepatitis, because Dr. Kirk and Dr. Krask had reported on hepatitis, and there was a discussion, amongst other things, about the use of liver biopsies in haemophiliacs. Dr. Daly, although obviously coming onto the scene in Truro only in the second half of the 80s, has explained in her statement that she was aware of hepatitis risks from the early 1970s, because she had, when very junior, been aware of the Edinburgh outbreak of hepatitis in the dialysis unit there. And then she's described in her statement her growing awareness between 1984 and 1986 of the potential for serious liver disease due to non-A, non-B hepatitis. There is one document, it's a slightly curious document from 1990, TSFT 601_011. This is a memo from Dr. Daly, 11th of November 1990, to all haemophilia centre directors in the southwest region, headed liver disease in haemophiliacs. And she says this: after the meeting in September, I thought I would try and find out specifically what is meant by liver disease in haemophiliacs, and it has not been easy. And then she talks about what relevance of elevations of ALT. Picking it up towards the end of that paragraph, such patients should have their tests repeated 3 times a year. In addition, clinical evidence for liver disease should be sought into disease on whether liver biopsy might be appropriate. And then she refers her Southwest colleagues to a number of articles, including articles by Professor or Dr. Kernoff in the British Journal of Haematology. We don't know, I'm afraid, anything about Dr. Morrell's knowledge in relation to AIDS, other than to say that certainly he ought to have received copies of UK HCDO minutes in the early part of the 1980s. Dr. Daly obviously had a particularly acute knowledge of AIDS in relation to Bristol, and we explored that on the last occasion when we looked at the Bristol Haemophilia Centre. In relation to testing for HIV, Dr. Daly says that from her perspective at Truro, patients were routinely advised they would have regular hepatitis and HIV serology at review appointments, but again, that obviously covers the picture only from 1986 onwards. Her recollection was of 2 patients at the centre being infected with HIV. The provisional data provided to the inquiry by UK HCDO suggests 4 patients recorded as testing positive for HIV in Truro in 1985. Dr. Daly was involved with the treatment of haemophiliac patients infected with HIV at Truro. She was the AIDS designated physician for Cornwall between 1989 and 1992. And so you will no doubt recall the evidence of the parents of Lee Turton, who the family having moved to Cornwall in 1989 and coming under the care of the centre, about concerns regarding the treatment with AZT and the toxicity of AZT. In terms of hepatitis C testing, we know that Dr. Daly attended a UK HCDO meeting in October of 1991, where the recommendation was that all haemophiliacs should be tested for hepatitis C, and all those tested by first-generation tests should be retested using second-generation tests. The reference for that, although we don't need to put it on screen, is HCDO 40491_001. Her recollection is that samples were tested for hepatitis C in Truro in around 1991. She doesn't think patients had been asked to consent to storage of sera, but says she advised patients she intended storing sera in the hope of future tests. She can't recall seeing positive hepatitis C results and informing patients of a diagnosis of hepatitis C. Whether that is simply the difficulties of remembering things without documentation so many years after the event, or whether it reflects the fact that she moved on from Truro in the course of 1992, we don't know. And again, so you've received evidence from individuals in relation to processes of being informed of diagnosis at the centre. One further document to look at is at TSFT 602_031. This is a form headed Southwest Haematologists Group HCV Audit Questionnaire, and it's for the Haemophilia Centre in Truro. The date on which the form is completed is unclear, but the date at the very bottom of the form is March 1996. So it will presumably have been filled in at either in or after March of 1996. And it gives us some information about patients with hepatitis C. So at 1.1, number of patients currently registered with your centre who've received cryoprecipitate or large pool coagulation factor concentrates 41. Number of these patients who are HCV antibody positive, 38. So by far and away, the vast majority hepatitis C positive. Number untested, 1. And it's the form says that person was not contacted. That doesn't obviously tell us the reason for that. And then we have in section 2 of the form an evaluation of the testing. Number who've undergone serial liver function testing, 31. Number with normal LFT, 15. Number with intermittently abnormal LFT, 13. Number with persistently abnormal LFT, 3. Number tested for HCV RNA, 33. The bottom of the page says that 2.7, are patients screened regularly for hepatocellular carcinoma? The answer is yes. Over the page, it identifies 2 patients as having had a liver biopsy. The criteria for liver biopsy is described as follows: disease likely to respond in consultation with a fully informed patient. And then we have information about antiviral therapy, so number of patients treated with alpha interferon 4. Appears to suggest no patients currently eligible but not treated, and the entry for budgetary constraints is not therefore completed. Number of patients sustaining response 6 months plus after end of IFN, so interferon treatment, 3 failed. Number of patients given ribavirin, other anti-HCV treatment, 0.
Just going back to 3.2, describe your criteria for liver biopsy. How do you interpret what is said underneath it?
It doesn't obviously make sense as a response to the question, unfortunately, other than saying that they expect patients to be fully informed. Disease likely to respond doesn't really explain why in one patient you might undertake a liver biopsy and in another you wouldn't.
Yeah.
And we don't, I'm afraid, know who completed this. It's obviously past the time when Dr. Daly had left at Truro, so it's not her form. If we look further down the page, the section on 5, your indications for antiviral therapy in HIV-positive patients, most of it's not completed, apart from 5.7 other. So this appears to be the criteria, PCR positive, but bearing in mind the genotype, the likelihood of response and the patient's wishes. And then if we go to the next page, no patients had died from liver disease at that point in time. None were also HIV positive. None have been referred for liver transplant. And then the question at 7, do you recommend HCV testing? This is in relation to sexual partners of HCV positive patients. And the answer to that is once. And then advice in relation to condom use, recommended for all patients, but advise evidence not definitive. So that's some information, apart from the statements we have from individuals about the process in relation to treatment for hepatitis C at Truro. There is one further letter that casts some further light on the position. If we look at WITN 1574003, this is a letter from Dr. Daly to Mr. and Mrs. Turton, to Lee's mum and dad. It's dated the 30th of December 2018, and it's in response to a query or questions from Mr. and Mrs. Turton. She explains in her second paragraph her memory of Lee, both from Bristol and from Truro. She then says in the next paragraph, I remember Lee had HIV when he came to Truro as a young child, and you say 1989. I presume he contracted this from non-heat treated factor VIII concentrate, most likely, but not definitely commercial non-heat treated concentrate. I don't remember if he was known to have hepatitis C also at that time, as HIV was considered the more serious illness. I do not remember when Lee first tested positive for hepatitis C. I do not have any of his NHS records. My following comments/observations are based on memory only. I've not been involved in the care of haemophiliacs since 1997. And then Dr. Daly goes on to provide some broader information about liver function tests and hepatitis C testing as follows. In the late 1980s, we were gathering liver function tests from patients with haemophilia as evidence was emerging that abnormal liver function tests may reflect harm and may be due to a yet unidentified form of hepatitis termed non-A, non-B hepatitis. In 1990 or 1991, an antibody test became available for hepatitis C, and patients were tested for this. This was initially in research laboratories. Dr. Tedder at Middlesex and University College Medical School London first had the hepatitis C test in UK. I can't remember when we in Truro first had access to the test for current or stored samples. Screening of UK blood donors began in 1991. Liver function tests, LFTs, were performed at the Biochemistry Laboratory, Royal Cornwall Hospital, Treliske. However, any viral tests, including hepatitis C tests, were sent to the Department of Microbiology and from there to NHS Regional Public Health Laboratory, Bristol. In early days, these may have been forwarded on to Dr. Tedder at the Middlesex Hospital. I don't remember when or where Lee's hepatitis C test was performed. And then if we go over the page, she deals with some matters relating to records. And then in the next main paragraph says this: to further complicate matters, some samples from some haemophiliacs in the late 1980s were stored in the microbiology department at RCHT, so that's the Royal Cornwall Hospital. This was done because at that time we did not know the cause of abnormal LFTs, and there was a lot of research going on to determine this. Samples were stored as we hoped there would be a test in the future. Consequently, there may be stored samples or results from stored samples which may have been tested retrospectively when the test for hepatitis C became available. The date on the sample means the date the sample was taken and not necessarily the date it was tested and when the diagnosis of hepatitis C became known. For some patients, there may be several years in the difference. Nonetheless, the date of testing for hepatitis C would have been recorded at the laboratory. In some cases, the date of seroconversion, when a patient became positive for hepatitis C, was inferred, i.e. between the last known negative test and first positive test. All this information can be requested from Royal Cornwall Hospital, but they may need some prompting as to what was done 26 years ago and different from today. That casts some further light on the processes in relation to both testing and storage of samples in Cornwall. Grateful to Mr. and Mrs. Turton for drawing that to our attention. I'm going to move now, sir, to Bournemouth. So we can take that down. Thank you, Shamik. The Centre Director, Bournemouth, in the 1970s, or rather from 1972 to 1977, was Dr. Stern, and he was involved in the establishment of the centre at the Royal Victoria Hospital in Bournemouth. He was assisted, as we'll see from a publication and a couple of letters, by Dr. Nancy Dilling. And then he was succeeded as Centre Director in December 1977 by Dr. Green. There's a document which announces in December 1980 that Dr. Green would then be moving to Portsmouth, but he seems to have remained in post at Bournemouth until 1981. And then a meeting of Haemophilia Centre directors in October 81 records that Dr. Hamblin had taken over as director of the Bournemouth Centre when Dr. Green moved to Portsmouth. But he doesn't appear to have remained in post for long, because by November of 81, Dr. Ossier was signing the annual returns, or the documents being sent to Oxford. And he's recorded in the minutes of the September 82 Haemophilia Centre directors meeting as having taken over as director. There was a move of location for the Haemophilia Centre then in the 1990s to the Royal Bournemouth Hospital, and it became described as the Bournemouth and Poole Haemophilia Centre. At that point, by 1991, Dr. Worsley was a co-director with Dr. Ossier of the Bournemouth and Poole Centre, and then she took over as sole director in due course. If we look at HSOC 0016116_018, we can see some information in this Haemophilia Society Council meeting from July of 1970 about the early attempts to establish a haemophilia centre in Bournemouth. If we go to the second page, top of the page, it records under the heading New Centres, Dr. Cutner referred to the correspondence he had had with the Secretary concerning the possibility of establishing the Royal Victoria Hospital, Boscombe, Bournemouth as a haemophilia centre. Mr. Prothero had informed him that this was one of the matters to be raised at the meeting with the Department of Health and Social Security. The department had still not fixed a date for the meeting. Dr. Stern said that originally Dr. Biggs had suggested he should apply to the regional board, but the board had said there could only be one centre in the region, and Portsmouth was the centre. He, and then this is Dr. Stern, spoke of the work of his department, which was organised on similar lines to some of the more effective haemophilia centres, and said that all his patients were very anxious that it should be established as a centre. Professor Hardesty said that he could not understand why there should only be one centre in the region. Portsmouth was a long and often difficult journey for people living in the Boscombe-Bournemouth area. And then there's a suggestion that the matter should be pursued with the Department of Health and Social Security. So that's the position in 1970. I won't go through all the documents. We can see that there were letters of support sent, for example, on behalf of Professor Hardesty and others. But it's recorded in another Haemophilia Society meeting in April of 1972 that official confirmation had been received from the Department of Health that, amongst other centres, the Royal Victoria Hospital, Bournemouth, had been officially designated as a centre. And we will see, again, we don't need to go to the underlying documents, Dr. Stern attended a meeting of Haemophilia Centre directors in April 1971, but was formally welcomed as the director of a new Haemophilia Centre in October 1972. In terms of supplies, the Bournemouth Centre received its NHS supplies from the Wessex Regional Transfusion Centre. If we look at HSOC 0029691_142, minutes of a meeting of the Haemophilia Society's Executive Committee, December 1971. If we go to page 5, top of the page, just gives us some information about Wessex and its supply to Dr. Stern in Bournemouth. Dr. Cutner had a most interesting visit to Dr. Smith, director of the new Wessex Blood Transfusion Centre in Southampton, which supplies cryoprecipitate to both Dr. Leslie's and Dr. Stern's treatment units, the latter being Bournemouth. Dr. Smith had been very pleased at the interest shown in what he was doing. The crews of many ships are volunteering as blood donors. So that may be an issue we'll pick up when we look at Wessex Regional Transfusion Centre in later hearings. If we then turn to NHBT 0112213, please. This is a document from February 1976 from Wessex Regional Transfusion Centre. It appears to be an estimate of future blood requirements. If we look at the fourth row down, we have the Royal Victoria Hospital Haemophilia Centre, Dr. Stern, and it said they are doing more dental and orthopaedic surgery on haemophiliacs and require larger doses of cryoprecipitate and concentrate. So that's the picture as at 1976. And around the same time, if we look at NHBT 01007767, we can see a letter, again, it's Dr. Smith, the medical director of the Wessex Regional Transfusion Centre, who's the author of this. It's the 27th of February 1976. We look at the bottom of the page, we can see it's sent to 4 principal recipients. They include Dr. Chisholm at Southampton, which we've already looked at, but also there Dr. Stern at the Royal Victoria Hospital in Bournemouth. And then if we go back to the text of the letter, we can see it raises issues about ability to supply cryoprecipitate. The new document HC 764, Arrangements for the Care of Persons Suffering from Haemophilia and Related Conditions, mentions that the management of patients undergoing surgery has become easier as a range of therapeutic materials have become more readily available, and it may no longer be necessary to refer patients to the reference centre at Oxford for major surgery. Unfortunately, in Wessex, our cryoprecipitate, 18,466 units annually, is at maximum production, and we are also trying to produce 11,000 units of fresh frozen plasma for the British Factor VIII concentrate. I have no news of when we shall receive Factor VIII freeze-dried concentrate from the Blood Products Laboratory, and it may well be another 6 months at least before any is available. But in view of this, may I request that if surgical procedures are contemplated as you've previously done, you keep us informed, and as Appendix 2, paragraph 7 suggests, that's presumably a reference to the document in the first paragraph, it will still be possible and may well be advisable to consult the reference centre at Oxford about the further availability of therapeutic materials if we're unable to help you. So issues there relating to supply of both cryoprecipitate and NHS concentrate in the Wessex area in 1976.
And there, when he talks about units, it won't be the same as units of factor VIII activity.
No, I wouldn't have thought so.
This will be bags, basically, I suppose, assuming that each bag is a single unit.
Yes, I mean, we may be able to ascertain that by reference to other Wessex documents and provide you with an answer when we look at the blood services at the hearings later this year.
Thank you.
If we then go to CBLA 40112, this is somewhat earlier in the 70s. This is December 1972. Dr. Dilling at Bournemouth writing to Dr. Maycock at BPL in relation to factor VIII concentrate for the treatment of haemophilia. Second paragraph says this: as regards choice between cryoprecipitate and freeze-dried concentrate, I would say freeze-dried would be usually more useful, more easily handled and more easily stored. It would, however, if made up in large numbers of units per bottle, be somewhat wasteful when only small amounts are needed, say for children. It's for this reason I would suggest that some of the supply be as cryoprecipitate. Should, however, small dose bottles be available, then the total supply could be as freeze-dried. And that's, I think, an explanation she's giving for the way in which she's filled in Dr. Maycock's questionnaire, which we will find at BPLL 308111. The Bournemouth response to the questionnaire is at page 4. In terms of how many patients with haemophilia are treated regularly, it says 29 regulars, 21 visitors, 19 occasional. And then the question, what would you prefer to use for the treatment of your patients? The answer that's given is some cryoprecipitate and some freeze-dried concentrate, that's 2C. And then we have, in the letter we looked at a moment ago, Dr. Dilling, I think, explaining why that was Bournemouth's preference. In terms of annual returns and patient numbers, the numbers vary quite considerably from year to year, and that may be a reflection of the fact that there were a number of people treated as visitors, because we see a variation between 15 and 41 haemophilia A patients in the period from around 1976 to 1985. We'll look at a handful of the returns, starting with HCDO 0001060. And so we'll see this is the annual return for Bournemouth for 1978. 41 patients treated, 3 with antibodies, of whom 2 were visitors, 4 haemophilia B patients treated. And then we can see in terms of products used, a significant volume of cryoprecipitate, 117,000 odd, more cryo than NHS concentrate, which is 108,000 or so. But the largest product in use is the commercial product Haemophil, 276,000 odd units of Haemophil used that year, and then a smaller volume of cryobilin. If we just look by way of example in the same document to page 15, this is one of a number of pages which appears to record for individual patients' batch usage. We don't see this for the following returns, I think, but for this year at least, this kind of data seems to have been retained. If we go then to find the right page, 1978, HCDO 00012335. And we go to page 21. We can see for 1978, 20 patients treated and for haemophilia A and 4 haemophilia B patients. And then we can see no cryoprecipitate usage at all. NHS concentrates 186,000 or so. So the largest single product in use is the NHS concentrate. But commercial concentrates used, both factor VIII and haemophil, and combined they add up to considerably more than the NHS concentrate in terms of overall proportions. It's a similar picture in 1979, where the products used are NHS concentrate, factor VIII, haemophil, and cryobuline. And overall, more commercial products are used than NHS product in terms of concentrate, and no cryoprecipitate recorded for the treatment of haemophilia patients. And again, in 1980, it's NHS concentrate, factor VIII, haemophil, and cryobuline. So again, a similar pattern. If we pick the matter up in 1982 at HCDO 000160, we can see again no cryoprecipitate used, NHS concentrates used in total between hospital and home, a little over 170,000, and then both haemophil and cryobuline are used. 94,000 odd haemophil at home, just under 12,000 hospital, 4,700 odd cryobuline hospital, and just under 92,000 for home treatment. So unclear why no cryoprecipitate at all appears to be used during these years. If we pick the picture up in 1983, at HCDO 301696, there's a small amount of cryoprecipitate used. And then we can see again NHS concentrates in use. The largest product in terms of overall usage is cryobuline, which for home treatment is 204,606 units. And a range of other concentrates also used. The volume of CoA is very small, but substantial volumes of both factor VIII and haemophil also in use in 1983. So plainly no reversion to cryoprecipitate in 1983 at Bournemouth. And then if we turn to HCDO 301792, which is the return from 1984. Again, no cryoprecipitate whatsoever recorded there for the treatment of the 16 haemophilia A patients treated during that year. We see NHS concentrate being used, and then the ARMA product, CoA, haemophil, and cryobuline. Again, the dominant treatment is the commercial concentrate cryobuline, with also reasonably substantial volumes of factor VIII at haemophil being used, some CoA, and then some NHS concentrates as well. We know from communications between the Bournemouth Centre and Dr. Snape in the course of 1985 that BPL heat-treated products were sought for some patients. I won't take you to the correspondence. We've seen similar correspondence elsewhere. In terms of knowledge of risk, there's some interesting material from Bournemouth in relation to hepatitis. So leaving aside the question of attendance at UK HCDO meetings, and Dr. Stern attended a number of meetings, we can see, if we pick matters up at DHSC 010018_041, it's slightly faint, but we can see here in 1974, Dr. Dilling reporting to the Regional Transfusion Centre, so the Wessex Regional Transfusion Centre, a potential case of hepatitis, and the view being expressed by Dr. Dilling that it's nothing to do with cryoprecipitate, as she refers to patients with haemophil, receiving only haemophil, testing HAA positive is what is set out there. And then there's a form she encloses, DHSC 010018_042. We just look at the very bottom of the page, where the opinion that's expressed is, I think this patient has been infected with serum hepatitis, but the evidence seems to suggest that haemophil rather than cryoprecipitate is the infectious agent. There's another case reported later in 1974, I won't go to the documentation in relation to that, where Dr. Dilling also thinks that the implicated product may be haemophil, although cryoprecipitate was still regarded as a contender. Then, if we go to HCGO 301017, we have here the minutes of the Haemophilia Centre Directors meeting in November 1974. The interest in this meeting in relation to Bournemouth is apparent from page 5, where under the heading Report on Jaundice Following Treatment with Commercial Factor VIII, we have Dr. Krask reporting to the meeting on an epidemic of hepatitis A and B in the haemophilic patients in Bournemouth who had received one particular batch of commercial factor VIII. 6 patients had hepatitis A and 3 hepatitis B. Dr. Krask said that his report was, as far as he knew, the first record of hepatitis A being transmitted to a group of patients by one batch of therapeutic material. And then the next paragraph refers to episodes of hepatitis in Oxford patients. And then there's a discussion towards the bottom of the page about problems arising from the use of therapeutic materials which might be contaminated with various hepatitis viruses. The Bournemouth outbreak became the subject of an article in the Lancet in August 1975. We've looked at it before, but not from a Bournemouth perspective. So if we go to PRSE 00011794, please. We'll see in the right-hand column under the heading Public Health, an outbreak of hepatitis associated with intravenous injection of factor VIII concentrate. And the authors of the article are Dr. Krask and then Dr. Nancy Dilling and Dr. David Stern from the Haemophilia Centre at the Royal Victoria Hospital in Bournemouth. The summary provides that an outbreak of jaundice associated with 3 out of 4 batches of a commercial brand of freeze-dried factor VIII concentrate occurred at the Bournemouth Haemophilia Centre between April and June 1974. 7 cases of non-B hepatitis and 4 of hepatitis B occurred within 6 months of the first use of this product. 2 patients contracted both types of hepatitis, thus 9 patients became ill out of a total of 20 regularly seen at the centre, 18 of whom received commercial factor VIII concentrate. And then if we look under the heading Introduction, the first paragraph reads, until lately haemophilia has generally been treated by cryoprecipitate. The introduction of freeze-dried factor VIII concentrate has brought considerable advantages, and then those perceived advantages are then described. And then the next paragraph says, treatment with factor VIII concentrates exposes the patient to a higher risk of contracting transfusion hepatitis. Cryoprecipitate, in which each bag is made from 1 or 2 donations, carries a relatively low risk of hepatitis. Commercial factor VIII concentrates, which are prepared from pools of 2,000 to 6,000 litres of plasma obtained by plasmapheresis from paid donors, would be expected to carry a much higher risk of transfusion hepatitis. So I think we can have no doubt about the state of knowledge of Dr. Dilling and Dr. Stern in Bournemouth as at the mid-1970s. They go on to describe the report of an outbreak of both short incubation hepatitis non-B and hepatitis B associated with the use of 3 out of 4 batches of a commercial factor VIII concentrate. If we go to the next page, I won't go through the detailed description of the outbreak, but if we go to the bottom right-hand corner of this page, we can see a discussion in relation to pool sizes, which again helps us understand the knowledge of those running the Haemophilia Centre at the time. The article says this: the measures now used by the National Blood Transfusion Service to reduce the incidence of transfusion hepatitis, such as the use of single donations and small pools of plasma, make the occurrence of more than one case of transfusion hepatitis as the result of contamination of a plasma pool by a single donor most unlikely. The risk is greatly increased with factor VIII concentrates prepared from pools of more than 1,000 donations. When blood for transfusion is prepared from commercial donations, this increases the frequency of jaundice 3 to 9-fold for single transfusions. The pool size, however, may be critical in factor VIII concentrates, since transfusion hepatitis is a known hazard with large pool products prepared from volunteer donors in the UK. And then if we go to the next page, again, there's a further discussion relating to the outbreak and its implications. But if we go to the bottom left-hand column, we see this being set out. What is required is a freeze-dried factor VIII concentrate prepared from volunteer donors in the UK, prepared according to an approved protocol of testing. A small quantity is available, but it's likely that some reliance will have to be placed on commercial sources for some time to come. In the meantime, some or all of the following measures might help to lessen the frequency of jaundice. 1, commercial factor VIII concentrates should be reserved for the treatment of life-threatening bleeds in all haemophiliacs and for covering major operations. 2, if used for treatment, commercial concentrates should be reserved for severely affected haemophiliacs, since they are more likely to be immune to hepatitis A and B. Treatment should be carried out by experienced staff who are aware of the risks of using large pool concentrates. And then 3 refers to giving consideration to a trial. So those were the recommendations being authored by, amongst others, Dr. Dilling and Dr. Stern in Bournemouth in 1975. We've seen from the returns that, in fact, the use of commercial concentrates and the non-use of cryoprecipitate seems something of a feature. But it is right to point out that Dr. Stern retired in 1977, and we understand Dr. Dilling died in 1975, and so they were then not the clinicians responsible for the subsequent course of treatment at Bournemouth over the years that followed in the late 70s and in the 1980s. There's a further discussion or report about the Bournemouth outbreak in a study co-authored by Dr. Krask and Dr. Kirk entitled Haemophil-Associated Hepatitis 1970 to 74 in the UK, a retrospective survey. I'm not going to go to it, we have looked at it previously, but for the benefit of the transcript, the reference is CBLA 000566. If I can just complete the picture in relation to hepatitis before we break for lunch. We know that Dr. Stern attended the Haemophilia Centre Directors meeting in September 1975, at which there was a discussion about post-transfusion hepatitis, and again a discussion of pool sizes and relative pool sizes as between NHS and commercial concentrates, to which Dr. Ingram contributed. And then in our written notes, we've referred to Dr. Green, who was Dr. Stern's successor, writing to Dr. Maycock at BPL in March 1973. The date is erroneous, it should have been March 1978. But that was to notify Dr. Maycock, I'm not going to put the document on screen, that they traced the recipients of 56 out of 60 bottles of a suspect batch of factor VIII. 13 patients have been treated with the batch. 1 had developed jaundice. It's right to note that Dr. Maycock didn't think that either the BPL product or indeed a commercial product was responsible. We know Dr. Green attended the Haemophilia Centre Directors meeting in June 1978. And then if we look at 1979, some further reports of hepatitis, ARMO 5029. This is a letter from ARMA to the medical assessor at the Committee on the Safety of Medicines, 21st of February 1979, and it encloses 5 yellow forms reporting 5 cases of hepatitis with factor VIII. The 5 cases have been reported from 2 centres, but only 1 batch of factor VIII, batch S12303, has been implicated more than once. And then we can see doctors reporting the reaction. Dr. Green is identified at Bournemouth as having reported reactions in relation to 3 factor VIII batches. And if we go to page 4, we can see here samples of the what were described as the yellow forms. Not proposing to go through the detail of it, but on this and the following 2 pages, we have the reports in relation to Bournemouth, bottom of page 4. We can see the kind of information given here in terms of reaction: became jaundice, liver function test very abnormal, hepatitis B negative, and then the patient's now described as completely fit. The next page, in relation to a separate patient, bottom of the page, describes that patient as becoming jaundiced and as being raised liver function tests. And then the third page, bottom of the page again, describes a patient becoming jaundiced, very abnormal liver function tests, hepatitis B negative, and then the outcomes described as the patient now completely fit. And then finally, before lunch, TREL 40313_128, please. This is a letter from Dr. Green in his capacity as director of the Bournemouth Haemophilia Centre, 25th of July 1979, to a GP. We need look only, I think, at the 3rd paragraph, which says this: you will, however, be aware that there's recently been some concern that haemophiliacs in receipt of a lot of treatment develop abnormal liver function tests and indeed chronic liver disease. It has become my policy in this centre to check their liver function tests and also look for the Australia antigen at 3 to 6 monthly intervals. And then goes on to deal again with the specific patient who was the subject of the letter. So some insight there into some particular knowledge of and involvement in issues relating to reporting of hepatitis cases in the 70s from Bournemouth. So I won't quite finish Bournemouth. Oh, no, actually, I think I probably will. 5 minutes and I could finish Bournemouth. I'm entirely in yours.
Let's go ahead.
So there isn't much documentation in relation to the position as regards AIDS, and we're very much dependent again upon an understanding of what clinicians would expect to know from attendance at UKHCD meetings and materials in medical journals and so on. There is a report from Dr. Ossier in March 1984 at HCDO 40238_017. This is to Ms. Spooner at the Oxford Haemophilia Centre. If we look at the second paragraph, we can see Dr. Ossier says this: I'm also taking the liberty of enclosing an AIDS investigation form. I realise that this probably should not come to you, but I've managed to lose the notes telling me who I should send it to. I think this is probably a reference to the AIDS reporting form circulated by Dr. Krask, on which he asked Haemophilia Centre directors to report possible cases of AIDS to him. So it would seem that that's a likely reference to that in March of 1984. And then if we go to DHSC 0002247_093, we'll see this is a follow-up in relation to the donation that had been made from a donor to the Wessex Transfusion Centre, the donor having subsequently tested positive for AIDS. We looked at the earlier letter in relation to Southampton. This is a follow-up letter, the 16th of October 1984, and we see from the bottom of the page the recipients include Dr. Ossier at Bournemouth, and indeed all the other directors in the haemophilia centre served by the Wessex Regional Transfusion Centre. And the second paragraph explains, in relation to this BPL batch, I'm extremely sorry to have to tell you that the diagnosis of AIDS has now been confirmed. And then reference made to correspondence from Dr. Snape. We looked at one of Dr. Snape's letters earlier, and a suggestion that there be a follow-up from Dr. Krask. And we're going to look at that when we come to one of the later centres this afternoon. There is correspondence to suggest that in relation to Bournemouth, that the suspect batch had not been used. There were letters which appeared to suggest stock of the contaminated batch being returned. In terms of data regarding infection with HIV, the UK HCDO data supplied to the inquiry indicates 8 patients may have been infected with HIV, 1 patient's test reported from 1984, 5 from 1985, 1 from 1988, 1 a date unknown. There's also a report, I don't think we need to go to it, but I'll just give the reference at MRCO 40388_188, which records 6 cases of AIDS having been reported at the Royal Victoria Hospital by July 1987. So that gives an indication in terms of numbers. That's not inconsistent with the UK HCDO data, which then reported a case from 1988 and a case date of testing unknown. We don't have information about numbers infected with hepatitis C in relation to Bournemouth. So that completes our look at the Bournemouth Centre, and then I can pick up the picture still in the southwest after lunch with Plymouth.
Yes. Oh, it's Plymouth at 2:05.